Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Just Politics Election Live. And what an incredible week in politics it's been. This week, Nigel Farage has been shaking things up. We're going to be talking about his entry into the political domain again, running for Parliament and running to be Prime Minister. We had our first live debates between Sir Keir Starmer and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. We've had all sorts of debates about tax and a £2,000 claim from the Conservatives that's been highly contested. We've also had D-Day and some controversy around there and a big apology from the Prime Minister. So lots and lots of things to talk about this week. And we'd love to hear from you. If you've got questions or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. But I would love you to meet some of my incredible guests. Got two brilliant guests joining us this evening from different ends of the political spectrum and different parts of the country. Let me first introduce you to Laura Young. Laura, good evening.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing?
Very well. And you're based in Dundee. You're an environmental campaigner.
Yep.
And you're currently in the middle of a PhD. Well, first of all, tell us about the PhD. And then I've got a lot of questions, and not all of them are about Taylor Swift turning up in Scotland today.
I know Scotland's gone absolutely crazy for Taylor this weekend. She, of course, landed today or yesterday even. But yeah, I mean, I'm doing a PhD and the topic is in climate resilience and community engagement. And really, it centres around the fact that, particularly now in Scotland and the UK, we are beginning to see climate impacts, particularly flooding and drought in the summer. I know Scotland can actually experience drought, shocks everyone. So we know we need to physically be changing places, but we need to do it with communities at the heart of that, both to help shape where they live, but also so that people understand when something like a flood happens, what do you do? How do you make sure you don't get stranded in your house? How do you increase your climate resilience? And so that's what I kind of learn about. That's what I research, and something that's, really, really increasingly important as we see these impacts. I mean, there's always been, the flooding in the news, the excessive rain. So it's something that's getting, definitely worse. But that's what my PhD is in.
Tell us, Laurie, where did this passion for the environment first come to you? Where does that come from?
I think partly when I was at school, I just loved geography. So kind of went to pursue that, not really knowing where my job might end up or where that might lead me. But yeah, absolutely loved learning about the world. But when you learn about the world, you also learn about how badly we're treating it. So all the kinds of pollution that we see, whether it's plastic pollution, oil pollution, air pollution, and you also just learn how that's impacting people, right? So it's not just that it's impacting the physical world, but we've got people who live with damp and mold, coming through their walls because we've not got good infrastructure. You've got people who, develop all sorts of, diseases because of the environment, and people that have to move around. Climate change is devastating countries, and that's causing a lot of this climate migration. So you learn about it and think, I want to do something about it. And so certainly I've, pursued that. And I think also part of it is, I'm a Christian, I've got a personal faith, and part of it is just looking outside at this wonderful world. And I believe that God created it for us to look after. So part of it is also just recognizing that. So a little bit of school, a little bit of doing things like Duke of Edinburgh, a little bit of faith, and just, realizing that we can have an amazing world. And I just want to help be a part of that.
Oh, it's brilliant to hear. I saw that you were awarded a very prestigious title. You were Scottish Influencer of the Year. How did that come about? And was that mainly due to the anti-vaping campaign, or was it the other pieces you've been doing as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess while I've been on this journey with environmental issues, I started an Instagram account. It's now across everything, called Less Waste Laura. You can see what I was trying to do, reduce my waste, try and be a bit more sustainable. And people were really interested. It caught a wave, I think, of people who saw things like Blue Planet 2 from David Attenborough and just thought, I want to try do something. So for years, I've had this online platform where I talk about environmental issues, campaigns, try and educate people, share the knowledge that I have. And it's got attention. Lots of people follow me and look to me for advice. And it's just a great platform. Actually, it's like a community online, really. And I love it. And so this year, there's these awards that happen every year, Scottish Influencer Awards, and there's all sorts of categories from sports to travel to fashion. But one of them is just the overall Scottish Influencer of the Year. And, I was absolutely humbled that this year
Fantastic.
they chose me to be it. And it's great because it's kind of different. When you think about an influencer, you maybe don't think of climate change, but that's what I do. So yeah, really honored. And it's given me a great opportunity to step into some places I wouldn't normally go in terms of events or working with companies to try and talk about it. So yeah, really love that I've had that
Oh,
opportunity, and it's something that I'm
congratulations.
humbled
I
by.
tried to
Thank you.
celebrate with some balloons, but I think I got fireworks instead. But that is
We'll go with that.
that's amazing. And we've worked together trying to inspire sixth formers to use their vote. These are first-time voters, the most unlikely, sadly, statistically, group to register to vote or to vote. And it was great working with you on that. So thanks for the way that you use your influence to try and get other people to engage. This week's been an interesting one in British politics. And I'm wondering, for a Scottish perspective on things, I'm only half joking that Scotland has become the centre of the universe tonight. I've got at least 4 friends that are in Murrayfield to watch Taylor Swift, and hopefully she'll bring a large uptake to the economy of Scotland. But I noticed during the television debate between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, I don't think there was a single mention to Scotland, and even the kind of low grade easy question was about the Euros, and it was almost like everyone forgot Scotland's in it. What does it feel like when you see the 2 most likely contenders to be prime minister kind of neglect to talk about Scotland on a national debate?
It's hard. And, I think regardless of your view on independence for Scotland, this is where it comes from. Like, even just these small instances where we don't even get a mention, it can just bring up that, come on, we're a huge part of the country in terms of land. We are where the oil and gas is, even though I'm maybe got different views on that, but that's where it is. Our nuclear deterrence that everyone's talking about, that's
Yeah,
up in Scotland. We've got a lot of the peatlands, which help store carbon for climate change. We've got loads of stuff up here that gets discussed, but the country never gets a mention, which is always something that we kind of wrestle with. And I think there's another layer to this as well, which is rightly so, a big focus on a lot of the campaigns from the kind of Westminster voices have been on education,
mm,
have been on the healthcare and social care. They've been on these really, really important issues which are devolved. And
mm,
so up in Scotland, we're hearing statistics and stories and news bites of stuff that's completely irrelevant to what we are voting on.
mm.
Our MPs represent us on a lot of issues, but these are not one. And so it can be difficult because on one hand, you want to feel part of the UK and you want to hear what they've got to say. But when they're not even mentioning you and talking about stuff that's not relevant, you
Yeah,
kind of think, okay, help us, help us, help us. So it's difficult, and I feel like at times there can be 2 elections happening at once. You've got the Scottish MPs talking about what they're trying to run for,
mm,
and then you've got this stuff going down in London that you kind of find it hard to engage with. And so it can be difficult. And as I said, the independence thing then gets kind of brought
yeah,
up again, and that can be difficult for people who are either on the fence or on either side of that, just wanting to hear about, what is going to happen at this election. So it's a difficult one, and
yeah,
we have our own, TV debates up here. We've got things going on, which is great, but certainly that was a frustrating debate to listen to.
yeah.
And a lot of even just the stuff that comes out, you think, come on, give us something, give us more that we can go on.
I mean, you're doing your doctoral studies at a university. I wonder whether you can give us a little insight on how Scottish young adults are considering this election if they're not being mentioned in the TV debates. There's been quite a lot of headline news about your first ministers in the past. All sorts of legal cases going on. What's the mood amongst particularly young people as they think about this election?
I think frustration is probably the word I hear the most. And partly it's interesting because I think younger voices are really passionate about various different issues. It might be housing. I mean, that's just a huge one.
Yeah,
And that's not just buying houses, that's also things like just renting prices, everything to do with housing, housing standards. It is to do with kind of mental health. That part of the healthcare comes up a lot. And things like climate change, issues to do with the future of the planet.
Mm,
And they're really passionate, but that doesn't always translate into political activity.
mm,
It more often than not results in maybe the kind of protesting, talking about stuff online, maybe voting with their money rather than voting with their actual ballot paper. And so I think there still is this struggle to get people to see the connection between the issues that they're passionate about and how that relates to engaging politically, getting motivated, contacting these people,
mm.
and ultimately voting. And another layer of complexity that's come up this time round is, so the election is on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And if you've got a postal vote, it's normally about 3 weeks before that you've got to kind of get that in. Maybe you've got a bit longer, but that's the kind of safe space. That's when they get sent out. That's when you need to do it. So we're talking the end of June till the 4th of July. That's the time that a lot of students go home.
Yeah.
Home to stay with friends or family, or they go away on holidays. So how are they going to vote? And that is something that this election was called right in the middle of exam season.
Mm.
So guess what? A lot of them are thinking about other things. They're thinking about their exams. They're trying to get through that. They're not thinking about, am I registered to vote? Where am I going to be? Do I need to
Yeah.
get a postal vote? But then will I be there for the postal vote? How do I navigate this? Do I do a proxy vote? There's so many things to think about. So it's been
Yes.
called a really interesting time where a lot of younger people potentially are on the move, potentially are back home. Where are they registered? So it even kind of brings up this,
Yeah.
element of actually, was it something that was important? And it's even in the Scottish school holidays. So for parents, kids of that really younger voice,
Yes.
So that's kind of a lot of thoughts there around both the engagement, but also
Fascinating.
just the logistics of this.
We had George from the GivenX campaign join us last week, and they're going to do another national voter registration push on the 17th and 18th. I think the 18th of June is the last
The
day
last
you
day.
can register to vote. And we're going to tease out some of those questions. Can you be registered in two places because you didn't quite know? How do you get the right ID? Because that's another issue.
Yep.
Obviously, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson got caught out on that last time when he was trying to vote locally. So what do young people need? So really good that you brought that up. I'm going to come back to you about what you think Taylor Swift has to say into our current political moment. But let me bring Paul Bickley out. Paul, good to see you. I don't think you're in Scotland, are you? You're in South London, if I'm right. Is that?
Yes, South East London. Yeah, Woolwich.
It's very good to see you. And you are the head of political engagement at a think tank called Theos, which focuses specifically on religion and faith in public life. Tell us a little bit about what it's like working for a think tank right now. A lot of the think tanks were a bit caught off guard by the election getting called quickly, but you seem to be ahead of the game and got some interesting research that we're going to be talking about in a minute.
Well, yeah, more by look than judgment, but we were working on a project which is really an analysis of something called a British election survey, British election study rather, which is a huge social science survey. It's not like you hear a lot of the time about polling that's been conducted, and that might be 1,000 or 2,000 people, and they're asking questions. Well, this is a 30,000 people survey that runs twice a year. So it's more of a kind of academic survey, but it asks some of the similar questions about how people are going to vote, whether they're going to turn out or not, and it also collects data around religion and belief. So we were interested to look at it and say, well, are the religious going to vote? Who are they going to vote for? How are they going to think about different issues? And is that going to be different from the population at large? And we've seen some really interesting things through that. Now we were working obviously knowing it was election year, but it's not. We didn't know either. We were completely caught.
It looks like you've got some kind of a great hotline to God there. That you were
it did look a bit like that.
Right in the right moment at the right time. I mean, let's just introduce this briefly. This intersection between faith and politics. I was just flicking through X this evening, and I saw George Galloway giving a talk. It looked like in a mosque. Telling everybody that you can't be a good Muslim and vote Labour. And he was quoting the Israel-Gaza conflict. And I felt that was really inappropriate, that he would kind of exert any kind of guidance. I don't know what religion he is. He doesn't come across as your bog standard Muslim, but to tell Muslims how to engage in politics based on their faith, I thought was really inappropriate. And
yeah, potentially illegal. Actually, there's a piece of legislation that says that religious influence around election time is I mean, it's never been, as far as I know, well, only occasionally been used in court, but it's potentially illegal.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. So George Galloway, watch out. And a lot of my Twitter feed is full of comment from America. I wrote something critical about a particular post that went out after Donald Trump was convicted of these 34 felonies. And the Christian commentator Eric Metaxas had retweeted an image. And it was an image of Jesus on the cross with guilty underneath, and a picture of Donald Trump with guilty underneath. And the headline was, "You're not sure whether you can vote for a convicted felon. Well, you worship one." And again, I found that as a Christian incredibly offensive. And people trying to, I guess, bully or force people to vote a certain way because of their religious affiliation. That, again, I don't think we'd do quite the same in the UK within the churches. Most people are pretty careful about that. But what is your survey telling us about the impacts of religion on politics? It's different to the US, and it's different, I think, from what we're seeing George Galloway do. But what is your survey telling us about the current relationship between religion and politics?
I mean, it does have an influence. So I think it's probably been understudied and under-researched. In the past, we've done some work, but the general feeling has been, I guess, in the academy and in the media, that it's just kind of not really a thing here. But it is. There are real relationships between particular religious groups and particular parties, affinities, if you like. Historically, people used to say that the Anglican Church is the Tory party at prayer. And that was true, and to some extent it is true. There used to be, people said, a kind of really strong affinity between the Roman Catholic kind of vote and the Labour Party, and that was true. We think that's kind of evaporating.
Really?
And of course, there's particularly vexed question at the minute about the relationship between Muslim voters and Labour. But a kind of hypothesis, if you like, that we approach this with is that there are basically two kinds of religion. There's the religion of affiliation, where you're trying to express something. I'm not saying, I don't want to, as it were, say that one is good and one is bad. Sure. But in religion of affiliation, what do you do when you just affiliate but you don't practice? So you're just saying, I'm a Christian, but you never, as it were, go to church, and it's not part of a worshiping community. And you're doing something different there to what you're doing when you say you're a Christian and then you go to church a couple of times a month, and maybe midweek you might hang out with some other folk from your church, and you're kind of spending time with them, and you're doing stuff, and you might try and do some things together. You might try and I don't know, run a food bank or run a toddler group, and you're just kind of engaged in a different way. So what we're saying is there is two kinds of religion in there, or specifically in this case, I suppose, two kinds of Christianity. And this is not dissimilar to the US, in fact. Whether this is coming to light a bit more is that basically non-practice, particularly, for instance, in the UK, non-practicing Anglicans vote heavily Conservative or Reform, thinking about Nigel Farage launching his campaign this week. So that would be a kind of ideal Reform territory and not non-practicing Anglican. But when you factor in practice, people lean more to the centre and to the left, so more likely to vote Lib Dem or Labour. But we're not just looking at, as it were, party choice. We're also looking at things like likelihood to vote, and practice makes a difference there as well. So that the more you go to church, the more likely you are to vote. So really now we have to kind of begin to ask questions. Well, why would that be? And there's something about the habits of affiliation and being with people and trying to do things with people that I think kind of encourages you to be more open. And there's something else as well, I think, about being able to act hopefully. There is in practicing religious groups more confidence about being able to do anything, being able to kind of change anything through politics.
Yes.
Whereas the non-practicing groups are, and the non-religious are far more cynical about politics. So there's some really interesting things even beyond that kind of. I mean, in the election, everybody's thinking about who's going to win and who's going to vote for who. But even beyond that, there are some interesting things in this research.
It's a fantastic piece of research, Paul. Well done. Congratulations. And I know you've got different reports coming out over the next few weeks as we move towards the general election. I mean, that difference between non-practicing and practicing, some people might describe it as cultural Christianity. I know that word's been used a little bit. So Richard Dawkins, just in the last few years, but more frequently in the last few months, has been describing himself as a cultural Christian, and in fact has described his Christianity as a bulwark against Islam. So that would overlap with your reform voter type demographic. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. Because what are you, to a certain extent, what are you trying to say? I mean, it's hard at the level of a kind of 30,000 people survey. Of course,
sure.
I wouldn't want to, as it were. If there's anybody on this call who's a non-practicing Anglican and just thinking this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, of course, it's an aggregate. It's a kind of, it's an average of the total number. But I think what I see in it is people attempting to say something about the state, the country they want to live in, and a sense of a kind of desire for a past, maybe something nostalgic about it. A sense that being uncomfortable with the way that country's changed. I'm not trying to in any way delegitimize those views. People feel like that, and it's important that they have voice and are able to articulate it. So if you feel uncomfortable about those things, as you know, we've been talking this week, you and I, Krish, about an upcoming paper we have on immigration, which shows that this kind of non-practicing Anglican group is the coldest when it comes to asylum seekers, for instance. So they're the most resistant of any group in the country, really, when it comes to.
I find that really depressing, and it for me it maps onto what I'm seeing in the US. That as I read the stats, and you're the expert, not me, but the non-practicing white evangelical Christians, so it's more of a cultural identity, are more likely to support Donald Trump and hold that coldness towards welcome and immigration. And again, I find that really sad because I feel like they're part of my extended family, and I have a very different set of views to them. But I guess, in fact, I'm running a global migration summit to talk about this, to say, okay, what does the Bible actually have to say about these issues? Because if you're going to attach yourself to the Christian family, even just using the name, it would be good to be up to speed with what the Bible has to say. And let's have the debate if we need to have a debate. But I think it's pretty clear welcoming the stranger is a core part of the Christian calling. But I'm kind of nervous about your report coming out, but I'm glad you've done the work and helped us look at the hard facts of what's really going on.
Sure, and it kind of probes us a little bit as well. Yeah, even as researchers, as we're working on this, and people who will see it, I think it's not surprising that we have a kind of reaction. I mean, we're not neutral. Like we have views, and our tendency is to think, no, we don't want you to think like that. So how can we present this in a different way? But it's I think the important thing to say again is that there isn't just one version of, as it were. I mean, the most simplistic and bad way to talk about this is to talk about a religious vote or a Christian vote.
Yes.
Really, we've got to break it down into different religious denominations, because they do act differently, socio and economically different groups anyway. So they're going to be thinking differently. But also, I am hugely encouraged by the way that practiced Christianity does tend to make people more up for being involved in democratic life. Even kind of forgetting an election that we one day out of 365, the democratic life that happens in all the other 364 days
Yeah.
If there are people of goodwill of any background, but if they're Christian, then great. If they're involved, if they're getting involved in political parties, if they're getting involved in campaigns like Laura, it's that kind of, being there for your neighborhood and being there for your country in some way, and pursuing causes that you're passionate in and feeling hopeful about seeing some change. That's a good thing for democracy, and far better than a kind of coldness and of course, one of the things that the Nigel Farage and populist political movements, one of the things that they are responding to, I think, is a sense of despair in a system. So a sense of this just isn't working for us. This isn't giving us anything.
Yes.
So I think any countervailing force to that, which says that, well, it might not make our lives perfect, but democracy is an opportunity for people to be involved and people to achieve positive change. That's a good thing.
That's really helpful. And I hope this research will help parliamentarians of whatever political party lean in to the faith community and recognizing what an impact they could have. And it's really interesting that you say that practice, actually turning up, spending time with the church community, might be active in a food bank, or you might be a foster care, or you might be an environmental campaigner. That's going to make you more likely to lean into politics. And so that would be a really good group to engage with. And I've seen that a little bit. I noticed this year, for the first time I can remember, both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party hosted Advent events, and it's normally the Conservatives, because they have that mindset that the Conservative Party is the Anglican church at prayer, but Labour did too, and that was interesting, particularly after there was a time when Labour were quite clear they didn't do God. So that seems quite an interesting change.
Yeah, and I would want to say, it's not for in this research it looks like a religious effect, but it's that if people are familiar with the famous book by Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, and the idea of social capital. I'm not wanting to make a kind of special claim necessarily for religious groups at all. I think that democracy thrives basically when there's all kinds of association, and all kinds of getting together, all kinds of trying to do things and achieve things together, a strong civic society. So but at the minute, I think with that sense of decay in civil society, religion is increasingly important in that sense of a kind of buttress for social capital, or a resource for social capital. And I think, in spite of, in some ways, religious decline and secularization, you would say, well, religion will continue to be important as a democratic force and as a positive kind of common good force in society.
It's really good. Let's bring Laura back, and then let's have a think about some of the bigger stories this week. Here was one event that you may have come across. I don't know whether this came up on your social feed. This is Nigel Farage in Clacton upon Sea. He has just announced his candidacy to run, and I think this is a McDonald's banana milkshake being chucked at him. And sorry, I've got my hay fever back again today. And in honour of Taylor Swift, he is definitely shaking things up, or shaking things off. What was your reaction when you saw this image, Laura? Let's start with you and then come to Paul.
I think I'm interested to know data behind increased sales in banana milkshakes, probably from McDonald's. I think it's a hard one, because I think when these kind of iconic general election moments happen, it grabs everyone's attention. The next day it was the front page of most newspapers. Everybody was seeing it. Everyone was commenting. And on one hand, it's just hilarious, right? It grabs your attention. It is funny just by the kind of comedy of what's happening.
Yeah.
And probably it represents what a lot of people think, which is, politicians of all parties seem to be kind of frustrating everyone. And there's, a bit of frustration. However, I think beyond the joke that is a banana milkshake to the face, there is this kind of, underlying issue of, what it means to be in the public sphere, what it means to be a politician. This is a kind of funny example, but actually, lots of MPs and politicians of all colours, stripes, and positions, put themselves at risk. And we've
Yeah.
seen really tragic examples of that in the past with, death, fatality, really serious issues. And also MPs talking about, the measures that they take on a daily basis to be safe. And I think, although it's funny, it does kind of remind us of what it means to put yourself out there trying, to kind of be that elected member. So it's, I think at first it's funny and we all had a laugh. And then when it's set, for me, it left me just feeling a bit unsettled.
Yes, yes. Well said. I mean, I tweeted almost immediately, and I was mindful of Nigel Farage has been saying some pretty harsh things about groups of people I care about, whether that was Jewish people, whether that was immigrants, and creating this hostile environment. And so my tweet was, sometimes you reap what you throw. But then I follow the Joe Cox Foundation, and they rightly, as you pointed out, drew attention to this already fear of attack and vulnerability that our politicians are facing. And whether you like the candidate or not, this ought to be the kind of place where people can say what they think and not face abuse. So I kind of quickly edited my tweet. How about you, Paul? What were your reactions?
Well, I think I slightly worry about the way of treating politics as a form of entertainment, and that has become basically a way of relating to it. And all of us there on X waiting for the latest kind of thing to happen, or mistake to be made, or gaffe. We're really treating it as a kind of form of entertainment, which I kind of get. A political commentator that I respected a few years ago was talking about a particular politician, who I won't mention, and said that this person symbolizes the jokey politics of low expectations. Wow. And it's almost like when you've lost faith in the idea that this democracy is important, and that it's important that we all get involved, and that serious issues are being debated, and that change will occur. When you've lost faith in that, you start to just see it as a bit of a joke. So I think these things, they feel like they feel like they land in that space. In a way, Nigel Farage operates in that space. I know what you were saying, Krish, in your original tweet there, but I worry a bit about that, and I'm sure it feels a little bit shaken up. But well, no doubt in the debate later tonight he'll be doing his thing.
That's right. You probably turn up with a milkshake, knowing him. Well, it's interesting you talk about entertainment. I want to talk a little bit about the Libdems. Last week, we were laughing, weren't we, at Ed Davey falling off a paddleboard, drawing attention, I think, helpfully to the pollution that was going into Windermere. But this question of whether Ed Davey was taking the elections seriously, or someone tweeted this week that Ed Davey seems to have more fun on the election trail than most of us have on our holidays, because he was going down a water slide and then he was on a bike. But each time those stunts were linked to a kind of policy arse, they weren't just kind of random. So if we were laughing with, or some people at Ed Davey last week, I think a lot of us were crying watching his party political broadcast, where he was very open about his own family, how he cared for his mother as a young person, and now cares for a son with a lot of learning difficulties. Paul, what was your take on the Lib Dems kind of changing tack this week?
Yeah, so I think they see themselves as having to operate within that system where most people are responding to politics as entertainment. So they were trying to pull these stunts. Actually, I was just quite impressed by the selection of issue, by the kind of and to be honest, the Lib Dems, whatever we might think about them otherwise, they do try and do serious policy and engage people around the issues that matter, where other parties are sometimes ignoring. So, of course, the issue is the issue of social care, adult social care in particular. But in his own story and in his own background, he's cared for elderly relatives and also his son who has special needs. So I was impressed with the issue selection. I was impressed with the engagement. I thought what it spoke to me of was of a thoughtful approach to this issue, and one we ought to pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree with you, Paul. And again, this is not a party political broadcast. We're, not telling you who to vote for whoever you see fit. We're not even going to tell you who we're voting for, but we're just thinking about this tonal change, I think. And I was very struck with the kind of humanity and empathy that was coming out in this kind of approach. I'm a foster parent. Some of our foster children have lived with us for, most of their lives. And it's I can't see a time when they won't need supervision and care. I can't imagine them living independently. So when Ed Davey says he's worried about who's going to care for his son when he's not here anymore, that's an existential question that our family's wrestling with. So it really spoke to me, and it was very powerful. Just while we're with you, Paul, and then I'll come to Laura on this. There was a story that came out this week referring to David Campanale, who is he was trying to run for Libdem selection. I think it was in the Independent this week, and there seems to have been some controversy about his deselection, and it seems to be linked to faith. That's how the allegations go. We're not trying to, prejudice any future investigation, but did that come up on your newsfeed? Were you aware of that story?
Yeah, we've been aware of it. I think there's some further background in that constituency as well. So a few years ago, the Conservative candidate was Baroness Philippa Stroud, or now Baroness Philippa Stroud was the Conservative candidate. From memory, the Libdems campaigned on, and her faith came up during the campaign, and it was a campaigning point for them. And I just wonder if that's just still in the system there within the local party, and there's still animus, there's still kind of fear and frustration around that.
Yes,
he's obviously trying to get himself selected in that seat, and there's whatever it is. What we don't know the facts, of course, but there's clearly been some kind of breakdown within the local party. That happens in all parties. Yes. But I would be concerned if his faith were being used as a reason to kind of avoid selecting him or take him out in any way.
That's right. Tim Farron, it was the former party leader of the Lib Dems, very open about his faith. Munira Wilson is also a Lib Dem MP, is very open about her faith. So this could be a kind of local manifestation rather than something that the Lib Dems affirm nationally. But yeah, watch this space, I guess. Let's see how things work out. Laura, what's your take on the Lib Dem campaign so far?
Do you know, I totally see the point about entertainment, but for me, the Lib Dem campaign has just been a bit refreshing, because I've loved the way that they have used these kind of funny, light-hearted stunts to talk about issues that are very, very serious, because I think it is a way for them, not as one of the major parties, to get the attention, but also talk about things that are really serious. And definitely this pivot, actually, in Ed being able to share some of his stories, I think has been really important, because, even so, I'm away just now on a little weekend away with some friends and family, and we were just downstairs having cups of tea. And one of the big things we were talking about is, among the group, we have a huge number of either grandparents or parents in their 80s now getting into this phase of life where they are beginning to see whether it's medical problems, or we're thinking about, what happens to these people that we love and care for when we're working, when we're busy, we want to support them. And I think Ed sharing his story of not only caring for his mother and other family members, but also his son, I think speaks more to what people are, themselves experiencing than just stats and figures of this is how much money we're going to pump into social care, or, this is how many new appointments we're going to try and get. Actually, for someone just to tell a story of how much this means to them gets me more on board. Now, that's not me saying who I'm voting for, or, telling anyone else to, but actually it grips me more than kind of facts and figures. And so I think it was really powerful. And I think maybe to also, I guess, bring in another part, which is, I think politicians bring us on board when they are relatable. Now, we're not going to relate to everything within a politician. We won't have the same life stories. But maybe a criticism that has been around of Rishi Sunak is just how unrelatable his life is in terms of wealth or experience or just perspective, whether it's his education or, whatever it might be. And that's a criticism. And maybe it's unfair because we can't help, how we've been brought up and what life path we've had. But certainly stories and experiences bring us along. And I think this is a powerful example where not everybody has the experience that Ed's had with a child with these additional needs, but we all have experience of saying, actually, I worry about the future of the people that I love, whether I'm there or not. And so, I think it's been a really powerful, refreshing, and it's almost felt like a pause. Okay, these election campaigns feel like a million miles an hour for 6 weeks.
Yes.
And when this interview went out, I felt like there was just a breath that we all took
to
remember actually what we're talking about. We're not talking about campaign strategies and colours, and we're talking about real people with real experiences.
I think that's right. And I would hope this different take could be taken up by all the parties, that we get less into the kind of attack ads and, just, who's going to pay more tax or less tax, but actually begin to think of the human impact. And that's what politics is about, isn't it? How we care for one another, how do we love one another, and a love-based relational politics is the kind of politics I'd like to see. And I'd like all the parties to adopt that kind of approach. So, I say kudos to the Lib Dems. They had a tough start with where they were in the polls, but I think they've really injected something important into the conversation. You talked about Rishi Sunak. Here is a picture from, man, it feels like a long time ago, but it was only yesterday, I think, wasn't it? It was the DDay commemoration, 18 years since the largest waterborne movement of troops, and just hearing incredible stories of teenagers who had to go and take on the axis of evil. I hadn't worked out until this week just how international that force was. Apparently there was 2 million troops mustering in the UK, and they're from all over the Commonwealth. And then when it came to the D-Day landing itself, it was America, Canada, and the UK were the kind of dominant forces, and so many people lost their lives on those beaches, and it was incredibly moving. But the big headline news today has been the fact that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak left early to do who knows what. It seems to be an ITV interview, and that's caused quite a lot of criticism. And today, Rishi Sunak issued an apology. And again, that's not something we come to expect from politicians, particularly in the middle of an election campaign. Paul, what did you make of well, A, Rishi's apology, and B, how it's all being covered?
Well, it's very difficult now. I think he probably felt that he had to get ahead of it and make an apology and try and sort of make the issue go away a little bit. Of course, in politics, you can't abstract the PR from, this is the difficult thing, isn't it? Every one of those people, even those people that are offering kind of authentic stories of their own life and experience, it is part of an appeal. I think the Conservative Party more widely, I suspect they're probably quite frustrated with how the campaign's going. There's this feeling that they've scored some hits, particularly in the leaders' debate this week. But there's been lots of trips. There have been lots of things going wrong, and this just seems to be like a very obvious trap to have fallen into. Well, it's not a trap really, but just a very obvious hole to have fallen into.
Yeah.
In an election campaign, you do not want to offend D-Day veterans or people that are in support of D-Day veterans, and it just feels like a bum. It also seems to contribute to me, like I think there is a little bit of a problem that it's David Cameron stood there who just kind of seems to project a kind of statesman-like kind of feel. And he is along other European statesmen, and Rishi Sunak is not there, and Rishi Sunak should have been there. So I think they will probably be as it were. I don't know what they'll be doing. Probably crying in the Friday night fish and chips at the minute, because it hasn't been a good day.
That's right.
It's
It's an interesting image. I mean, you're right. David Cameron looks very statesman-like. They're all wearing the right outfits, like they coordinated the dress sense for the day. But weirdly, just it works out that he's in the shadow, almost like saying, I shouldn't really be here. Someone else should be. And I think I've seen a tweet with Count Binface has replaced David Cameron in the lineup, saying, I'm going to go after Rishi's seat. So really tough moment. I mean, one comment I read was that there's something going wrong with the advisors that Rishi's got around him, that he might have too many people that are the same as him, and therefore they're not spotting the kind of cultural blind spots or the things that is, there's a lot to cope with in an election campaign. And I can't imagine what diary management is like and trying to get everything lined up. Looking back, it would seem to be no one would want to leave this 80 years, once in a lifetime, never probably going to gather these veterans in the same way ever again kind of moments. And then, as you say, an own goal, it looks like, when a lot of the commentary was around asking young people to step up and do national service. And, you're asking young people to step up for a year, Rishi, but you can't even step up for an afternoon. That was one of the attack lines that came out today. Laura, what do you make of it? What's happening either with this DDay thing and the apology, or the advice that he's getting? What's your take on what's happening?
Yeah, I think optics are something that has just been off for this whole campaign. Let's even think back just a few short weeks. This all started with an announcement in the pouring rain, with no umbrella, with things can only get better blaring in the background, with a sort of rushed announcement. From the beginning, everyone's question was, who on earth did not tell him, should we not do this inside? Would you like a brawly? There was so much around even just the launch that I think felt weak. It felt like, we've got to this point. Let's just have a general election. You can barely hear me. I want to get inside. So I think there probably is a question about, Rishi himself being able to make decisions that help make him, his party, and the country look strong, but also who around him. Is it the case that, as you've said, everyone just thinks the same, so no one's there to challenge it? Or is it that nobody feels like they can challenge it? Is there actually an environment that says, I want to say to him, maybe this isn't the best look, but is it not a safe space to do that? There's maybe two competing things there.
Yeah. Well put.
And I think for me it is, a lot of it is about these moments are important, and looking at these people who are there in this photograph, they're turning around going, oh, all right, your leader didn't make the effort to turn up. And of course, absolutely, David Cameron is a big figure, historical figure. So, they're probably thinking, well, that doesn't bode well for whoever comes next, because we're going to have this view that the UK didn't show up for this very important moment.
We've rightly challenged a lot of what Rishi Sunak's been doing. I want to commend him for something. Like this morning, he did issue an apology, first on Twitter and then live on television. And I think, there are lots of things that I would agree with and disagree with in Rishi's policy unit. But saying you're sorry, fessing up, facing it, rather than trying to obfuscate your way out of it, I think that is to be commended. I'm often critical that MPs don't apologize, so I want to say well done. Whatever the motivation was, I think it was the right thing to do. And sometimes we do need to face up and just say, sorry, I got it wrong. They are human, and so I think that's a wise thing to do. Just on the debate, let's go back to Tuesday night for a minute. We haven't spoken much about Keir Starmer. Keir got quite a lot of criticism for looking a little bit nervous, for not refuting this claim that I think the Prime Minister reiterated 7 times throughout an hour and a quarter long debate around a supposed £2,000 tax increase if Labour comes into power. But then the next day, this report comes out, or a letter comes out from the chief civil servant in the Treasury saying that shouldn't have been there in the first place. What do you think? Do you think Keir Starmer played a blinder? Did he not need to refute it because he knew the next day someone was going to come out and say, look, this was wrong? And then the rest of the week, I mean, even this morning, the headline news was about whether the Prime Minister had told the truth or not. So that then became like 3 days worth of news story. But was that a genius move in the debate, or is that what's your reading? Let's start with you, Laura, and then we'll go to Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how much credit we want to give him. Do we want to give him the credit of being a genius and having this all planned out, or, is it in the heat of the moment? It is hard sometimes to be firm and to say, I think that is a lie, that is not true on a live TV debate. It can get into really tricky territory. But I think he was firm with definitely what he was replying. But I think he probably did decide to let it play out, because 6 weeks is a long time. So there's time for the papers and the media to investigate and to pull this out. And actually, I think it's played out well, whether or not he was, deciding to win. But I do think he could have been stronger, particularly for that first debate. And even with that, there was that sort of exit poll of the debate, and Rishi won by 1% or 2%. So potentially you could say at the time maybe wasn't the best. And he didn't seem to come off that strong. But of course, we know that all of this has come out, and certainly that has not looked good for the Conservatives. The question is, did the people who watched that debate, did they then look at the news and then flip their mind? We almost need an exit poll from the media afterwards.
Well said. What's your take, Paul?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I don't think in the moment he was sort of saying to himself, "I'll just let that go and it'll all come back to bite Rishi." I don't think he was saying that. I think he probably had been hyper rehearsed for what was quite a particular format of debate, and just wasn't quite fleet of foot enough to respond to it in the moment. As it happens, it has sort of fallen apart a little bit as a claim. And that's been to Labour's benefit on this occasion. And I think also speaks to that previous question we were talking about is there something kind of just not quite right in the Conservative campaign that they would have gone with that as the kind of main thing in their pocket. They should have been aware that it would kind of fragment and break up, and to have a civil servant saying, we wrote a letter to the team saying they should not use this the day afterwards, and it flips what was like a good win story for them into 2 days of basically neutral or probably negative coverage. So it does look, as Keir Starmer began to say, it does begin to look desperate, and like they're just doing whatever they can, even if it involves sort of slightly misleading claims. So yeah, I do wonder if there's something just kind of, it feels like they need a hard-bitten general election. Has run several general election campaigns before type figure in there. I'm not sure if we've got anybody of that kind.
That's a good point.
A really mature campaigner who knows that a short-term win on the night is not necessarily going to be a benefit to you across weeks of a campaign.
I mean, it speaks a little bit, just thinking back to that debate, and we've been talking about the way that politics has become entertainment, that the format of the debate felt like that. You were given such a short amount of time to answer the question. It didn't really promote, exploring policies. It was looking for the quick win, the put down or the kind of one-liner, and that, I don't think that's necessarily the way that our politics needs to go. It feel a lot of my Twitter feed was saying, this is the Americanization of politics. Well, I think this is becoming politics in a lot of places, not just in America. So how could we elevate that? And I wonder whether, I feel like we've had a fair-minded conversation tonight. We haven't picked a side, but we're trying to get behind the headlines and find out what's going on. I want a more compassionate politics, one that doesn't mean if you disagree with someone, you chuck a milkshake at them, or you're just trying to find a hole in someone else's theory. But I dream of a day that we might have a politics where you can actually say, well, that is a good point. I agree with you. We've both committed to that. We've got a different strategy for how we can get there, but we both want to see our country develop. But it feels like a zero-sum game. And I've met politicians from, all the major parties who are willing to think like
Yeah.
that, willing to be bipartisan, and we don't need to go for the PMQs type warfare in the way that we do politics. So I think the more conversations we have like this, maybe we can model something different. And I guess we're seeing that a little bit in things like some of the podcasts that are out now, can't we? So things like The Rest is Politics. You've got two former opponents, having a robust but friendly conversation. So maybe there is hope for our politics going forward. Well, look, it's been a pleasure. I could spend all evening chatting to you. I know many people want to go and watch another debate that's going on with Nigel Farage and various other smaller party members. And I think there's even an England. I don't know if there's a Scottish game. Is there a Scottish football game that you know of? I bet there is.
Oh, you're asking the only thing we're thinking about is Taylor Swift. That's all. That's all that's happening. That'll be what I'll watch it via Instagram stories of everyone there.
You're
I'll probably see the whole thing.
Am I right, Laura?
I'm not a Swiftie. I don't know. It's her private jet. I just can't. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's another story, but there are definitely songs I love that she plays, and my daughters and my nephew, big fans. My nephew's there right now. He's wearing a sequined cowboy hat as we speak. So there are definitely songs I like, but they just feel so narcissistic, so small worldy. I'm trying to find a song that says anything about what's happening outside of her emotional life, and a lot of people can relate to that, but I really struggle that the world is so small, even though she's so well traveled. But anyway, so we're not missing Murrayfield, it sounds like.
No, we're
brilliant.
fine.
Well, thank you, Paul, and we look forward to reading more of your reports. I'm in fear of your next report coming out this week around faith and immigration, but I look forward to engaging with it. And Laura, thank you for all that you're doing with speaking up about the environment, encouraging young people, organising, and well done on the Scottish Influence of the Year. And it feels like the vape ban is closer than it's ever been. So congratulations for all your brilliant work. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on the Just Politics Election Live special. Who knows what we'll be talking about next week. But join us same time, same place, 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.